Hey everyone, I never thought I'd find myself here, telling a story like this, but I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs at you. My name's Ethan, I'm 34, and my wife, Megan, is 32. We've been married for almost 10 years now, and on the surface, everything looked perfect. Megan is, well, she's a force of nature. Confident, sharp-tongued, and fiercely independent. She's always been the type of woman who knew what she wanted, and honestly, that's one of the reasons I fell in love with her. But lately, things have been off. I didn't want to admit it at first, you know, when you're so deep into your life with someone, it's easy to ignore the cracks. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple. Megan's always had this intense side to her, very private about certain things, but I figured it was just her nature. She came from a tough background and learned to keep her cards close. Maybe too close, now that I think about it. I guess it all started a few months ago. Megan had been acting different. Not in a way that screams trouble, but just little things. She became more defensive about her phone, always keeping it face down, which was weird because we've never had issues like that before. Whenever I asked her about it, she'd roll her eyes and make me feel like I was being paranoid. "What's your problem, Ethan? You don't trust me now," she'd say with that sharp tone of hers, and I'd back off. But I could feel something wasn't right. I tried to push it out of my mind, tell myself I was overthinking it. After all, Megan had never given me a reason to doubt her before. At least, not until then. After brushing off those initial suspicions, I tried to convince myself everything was fine. But honestly, the signs were getting harder to ignore. Megan had always been busy with her work, she's a real estate agent, so the long hours and weekend showings were nothing new. But she started coming home later, sometimes not even showing up until well past midnight. She'd blame it on a difficult client or some emergency that just couldn't wait. At first, I believed her. Megan's always been a workaholic, and I never questioned it. But the excuses became more frequent, and the energy between us changed. I started feeling like I wasn't even a part of her life anymore. She was distant. And cold. We went from having late-night conversations in bed to me just sitting there, scrolling through my phone, waiting for her to come home. When she finally did, it was like she'd already shut down for the night. Barely a word. No connection. Even the intimacy between us dropped. We used to have this amazing physical connection, but now, nothing. I'd try to initiate something, and she'd pull away, saying she was too tired or stressed. I didn't push her. I thought maybe she was just going through a rough patch with work, that things would eventually go back to normal. But in the back of my mind, this nagging feeling kept growing. It's funny how you can live with someone for years and still feel like a stranger in your own home. Megan had mastered the art of dodging questions. Anytime I tried to bring up her strange behavior, she'd snap, telling me I was imagining things. "Stop trying to control me, Ethan. You're suffocating me," she'd say. And of course, I'd back down again. But here's the thing, Megan's never been someone who could be easily hurt. She had this wall around her, like no one could get to her. She'd brush things off like they were nothing. I, on the other hand, started losing sleep, replaying all these little moments in my head, trying to figure out what had changed. Something just didn't feel right, but I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. Things took a weird turn when Megan started talking about her hairdresser, a guy named Josh. I'll be honest, I didn't think much of it at first. Megan had always been particular about her hair, and Josh had been doing it for years. He had a good reputation in town, and from what I'd heard, he was supposedly the. But then she started mentioning him more often, like, way more often than usual. She'd come home and say things like, "Josh said I should try this new color," or "Josh thinks my hair would look better with layers." It was always Josh this, Josh that. One Saturday, she told me she had an appointment with Josh and that she'd be out for a few hours. I didn't think much of it until I realized it was the third appointment in 2 weeks. 3 times in 2 weeks for hair. I know women take their hair seriously, but this seemed excessive, even for Megan. That nagging feeling in my gut was back, stronger than before. I asked her about it casually one night while we were having dinner. I tried to keep it light, like I wasn't suspicious or anything. "You've been seeing Josh a lot lately, haven't you?" I asked, forcing a smee. She didn't even look up from her plate. "Yeah, so? What's?" I shrugged. "Nothing, just seems like you're there all the time." That's when her mood shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and she put down her fork. "Are you trying to accuse me of something, Ethan? Seriously, you're acting like a jealous." I could feel the tension thickening. "No, I'm just curious, that's all." "Well, stop being curious. Josh is just my hairdresser. You're overthinking it." And that was the end of the conversation. Megan had a way of shutting things down quickly, making me feel like an idiot for even bringing it up. But it didn't ease my mind. If anything, her reaction made me more suspicious. Why did she get so defensive over a simple question? The next big red flag came about a month later. Megan told me she was going on a girls' weekend with her friend Lisa. Now, I knew Lisa, and while we weren't super close, I'd met her enough times to know she was pretty solid. I figured the trip would be a good thing for Megan since she'd been so stressed lately, and maybe it'd help her unwind. She packed up Friday morning, kissed me goodbye, well, more like a peck on the cheek, and told me she'd be back Sunday night. I tried to push the weird Josh stuff out of my mind and just let her have her weekend. "Have fun," I said, smiling like everything was fine, even though deep down, that pit in my stomach was back. Saturday morning, I was supposed to go play golf with a buddy, but the plans fell through, so I decided to hang around the house. That's when something strange happened. I got a text from Lisa, yeah, Lisa, the same friend Megan was supposedly on a trip with. It was a random forwarded meme or something, but it was enough to make me pause. I stared at the screen for a minute, confused. Why would Lisa be texting me if she was with Megan? So, I shot her a quick reply, "Hey, hope you and Megan are having a great time on your trip." Her response came back almost immediately, "What trip?" My heart skipped a beat. I sat there staring at my phone, unsure how to react. I quickly played it off, "Megan said you two were on a girls' weekend." Lisa replied, "Nope, I've been home all weekend with the kids." That's when the panic set in. I felt this heavy weight drop into my chest, and my hands started shaking. I didn't reply to Lisa after that, but my mind was racing. If she wasn't with Lisa, then where the hell was Megan? And why would she lie about it? I tried to call Megan a few times, but it went straight to voicemail. Of course. I texted her, asking how the trip was going, but I got no response. The silence was deafening, and I spent the rest of the day feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. Was she with Josh? The thought made me sick, but I couldn't shake it. It all started to fit together in my head, the late nights, the constant mention of his name, the defensiveness. My heart was racing, and I could barely focus on anything else. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was a mess. I needed to know where she'd really been. I wasn't going to sit around in the dark any longer. Sunday evening came, and Megan finally walked through the door around 7 p.m. She was all smiles, like she'd just had the time of her life. "Hey babe," she said casually, dropping her bag by the door. "The weekend was great. So nice to get away for a bit." I stood there, my stomach in knots, trying to figure out how to approach this. My mind was screaming at me to confront her, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without more proof. Instead, I decided to play it cool, just for now. "Oh yeah?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was Lisa?" Megan didn't even blink. "She's good, we had a blast. Did some shopping, hit the spa, all the usual stuff. I could feel my pulse in my ears. She was lying, right to my face. "That's great," I replied, forcing a smile. "Lisa actually texted me while you were gone." Her face froze for just a second, but it was enough for me to catch it. "Oh. What about?" "She said she's been home all weekend with the kids." The room went dead silent. Megan's eyes flickered with something, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, right, I meant I went with some of her other friends. Lisa had to bail last minute." Her voice was steady, almost too smooth. She had an answer for everything. A well-crafted lie, ready to go. I stared at her, trying to read her expression, but Megan was always impossible to read. She was a professional liar. I had to give her credit, she didn't miss a beat. But the way she avoided eye contact for just a split second told me everything I needed to know. "I see," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. I didn't want to push too hard and tip my hand. Not yet. But I knew, deep down, that she was hiding something. And it wasn't just a cancelled girls' trip. She shrugged off her coat and went straight to the bedroom, as if nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, I stood there, my mind spinning. I had to figure out what was really going on, but I couldn't confront her without solid proof. I couldn't accuse her of cheating based on a hunch, no matter how strong that hunch was. So, I decided to wait. I needed to be smarter about this. If Megan was lying about where she was, then there had to be more secrets. And I was determined to find them. Over the next few days, Megan acted like nothing was wrong. She went back to her usual routine, work, late nights, and constant trips to see Josh. It was almost like the girls' weekend lie never happened. But I couldn't let it go. My mind was racing every time she left the house, every time she glanced at her phone with that smirk she didn't think I noticed. I decided I needed to take action. I wasn't going to live in the dark anymore, letting her manipulate me with her calm lies and easy excuses. I needed proof. I started small, checking her phone when she wasn't around. Megan was smart, though. She always kept it locked or close by, like she knew I might snoop. But one evening, when she went to shower, I saw an opportunity. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, unlocked. My heart pounded as I picked it up. This was it. This was my chance to finally know the truth. I scrolled through her messages, but there wasn't much. Just the usual back and forth with her work contacts, some friends, and me. But then I noticed something strange. There were barely any texts between her and Josh. For someone she supposedly talked about all the time, there was almost no record of him on her phone. My suspicion deepened. She had to be deleting their conversations. Why else would there be nothing there? I went to her call log next, and sure enough, she'd called him a few times over the past week, but again, nothing that raised alarms on its own. Still, it felt like she was hiding something bigger. She was too careful, too perfect about keeping things clean. I put the phone down just before she came out of the bathroom, my heart still racing. I knew I had to do more than just check her phone. I had to catch her in the act. So, I decided to follow her. The next day, Megan said she had another appointment with Josh. It was the perfect excuse. She didn't know that I'd already taken off from work. When she left the house, I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed her car. I kept my distance, trying to make sure she wouldn't notice me tailing her. But instead of heading to Josh's salon, like I expected, she took a different route, out of town. My stomach dropped. She drove for a good 30 minutes, out to this secluded area with an old hotel at the end of a long, winding road. I pulled over a few blocks away, far enough that she wouldn't see me. I watched as she parked the car, got out, and walked into the hotel without looking back. I sat there in disbelief. What the hell was she doing? This wasn't just about a haircut. My mind raced, but I knew I couldn't confront her here, not without more proof. So I waited, my heart pounding, watching the hotel entrance like a hawk, trying to make sense of it all. I sat in my car for over an hour, watching the entrance of that damn hotel. Every minute that passed felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to convince myself I was wrong, that there was some logical explanation for all of this. Maybe Megan had a client meeting there, maybe it was some kind of business thing, something innocent. But deep down, I knew. This was no work trip. Finally, just as the sun started to set, I saw them. Megan walked out, and she wasn't alone. Josh followed right behind her. They were laughing, talking like old friends, or something more. The sight of them together made my blood run cold. And then it happened, he leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss. A long, slow kiss that said everything I needed to know. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I felt frozen, stuck in this nightmare, watching my wife, my Megan, with another man. And of all people, it was Josh, the hairdresser she'd been talking about so casually for months. The one she made excuses about. It had all been right there in front of me, and I'd tried so hard not to see it. They stood there for a few more minutes, talking like nothing in the world could touch them. I didn't even realize I was gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles had gone white. Everything inside me was screaming to get out of the car, to confront them, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the betrayal, by the sheer audacity of it all. I watched as they got into their separate cars, Megan driving back home like nothing had happened, while Josh went in the opposite direction. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I thought we were solid, despite the recent distance. But seeing them together, so comfortable in their deceit, was a reality I couldn't escape anymore. When I got home that night, Megan acted like everything was fine. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was. I just nodded, numb to it all. She had no idea that I knew. No idea that I'd watched the whole thing. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to gather myself, figure out what to do next. I sat there, watching her go about her evening routine, wondering how long she'd been lying to me. Wondering how many times she'd kissed him like that, made me believe she was just getting her hair done, while she was off with Josh, in some hotel, living a life I knew nothing about. The secret was out now. And everything had changed. The next morning, I barely slept. My mind was in overdrive, trying to process everything I'd seen. Megan's betrayal felt like a weight on my chest, but I wasn't ready to confront her in a full-blown fight. I needed to see how far she'd take it, if she'd admit to anything. Megan was in the kitchen, making coffee like it was any other normal day. I sat across from her at the table, staring into my cup, still trying to wrap my head around how calm she seemed after everything that had happened. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to say something. "So, what's going on with you and Josh?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. Megan froze for a second, then turned to face me. "What do you mean?" "Nothing's going on." I couldn't believe how easily the lie slipped from her lips. But instead of pushing harder, I decided to bait her. "I saw you yesterday. At the hotel." Her eyes widened just for a second, and I thought I had her. I expected the floodgates to open, for her to stumble over her words and confess everything. But instead, she sighed, as if the whole thing was one big misunderstanding. "Ethan, you have it all wrong," she said, stepping toward me, her voice soft. "I can explain." I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue, every part of me screaming that she was just going to lie again. "Look, Josh and I have been working on a little side project together. It's nothing serious, he's helping me connect with some clients who are looking for properties. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd get weird about it. But there's nothing going on between us." I stared at her, trying to see if there was any truth in her words. She walked over and sat beside me, placing her hand on mine. Her touch felt familiar, comforting even, and for a second, I wavered. "And that kiss?" I asked quietly, barely able to get the words out. "I saw you kiss him." Megan's face softened, her eyes wide with what looked like genuine regret. "Ethan, it wasn't what you think. I swear. He kissed me, yes, but it wasn't like that. He was thanking me for helping him out with a huge deal, and it just happened. I didn't expect it, and I pushed him away right after. I should have told you, but I was embarrassed. I didn't want you to overreact." I sat there, staring into her eyes, and as ridiculous as it sounded, a part of me wanted to believe her. She looked sincere, her voice pleading, and I felt the years of trust we'd built creeping back in. Could this really have just been a stupid mistake? A one-off, awkward moment that meant nothing? "I would never cheat on you, Ethan," she whispered, her hand squeezing mine a little tighter. "You know me. I would never hurt you like that." I wanted to call her out, wanted to throw the truth in her face, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the need to believe that my wife wasn't lying through her teeth. Maybe I was just too scared to admit how deep the betrayal really went. So I nodded, my heart still torn, but my mind too tired to fight anymore. "Okay," I said quietly, not really sure if I believed her or if I just wanted to. Megan smiled, leaning in to kiss my forehead. "Thank you for trusting me." But as she walked away, back to her normal routine, a small voice inside me whispered that this wasn't over. That there was more to the story than she was letting on. And even though I'd let her off the hook for now, I knew deep down I couldn't just let it go. It didn't take long for my doubts to creep back in. Megan's explanation played on a loop in my head, but no matter how hard I tried to accept it, something didn't sit right. The way she brushed off that kiss, the perfect timing of her excuses, it all felt too convenient. But I kept my distance, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. And it did. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I'd left work early, something I never do, because the gnawing feeling inside of me had become too much. I needed to see her, to find out if I was just being paranoid or if my instincts were right. When I pulled up to the house, Megan's car was in the driveway, which wasn't surprising. But then I noticed another car parked across the street, one I recognized immediately. It was Josh's. I felt my heart start to pound. The logical part of me told myself to calm down, that it didn't mean anything, yet. But the other part, the part that had been on edge for weeks, knew this was the moment I'd been dreading. I quietly unlocked the front door, trying not to make a sound. The house was eerily quiet, except for faint voices coming from the living room. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, and that's when I heard it, a soft laugh, Megan's laugh, followed by something unmistakable. The sound of her moaning. My stomach twisted as I moved closer to the living room. My legs felt like lead, but I kept moving, inching toward the open doorway. And there they were, Megan and Josh, tangled together on the couch, their clothes tossed carelessly around the room. She was on top of him, her body moving in ways that had once been meant only for me. For a moment, I froze, as if my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This wasn't some fleeting kiss or a misunderstood gesture. This was my wife, having sex with another man in our living room, in the house we built our life in. And then, everything inside me snapped. "What the?" I yelled, my voice coming out more like a roar. Megan jumped off Josh, grabbing for the blanket to cover herself. Josh stumbled, trying to get his pants on, his face pale with shock. "Ethan," Megan stammered, but I didn't let her finish. "Get out!" I screamed, pointing toward the door. "Both of you, get thee out of my house." Josh, still fumbling with his clothes, tried to say something, but I wasn't having any of it. I lunged at him, grabbing his shirt and shoving him toward the door. "Get thee out before I break your face!" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. He scrambled, barely able to get his shoes on before bolting out the front door. Megan stood there, clutching the blanket around her, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't care. I couldn't even look at her without feeling like I was going to explode. Ethan, please, I can explain. Explain. I cut her off, my voice hoarse. There's nothing to explain, Megan. You've been lying to me for months. Get your and get out. Now. She hesitated, like she thought there was still a way to fix this, but the look in my eyes must have told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't something we were coming back from. She slowly gathered her clothes, still trying to speak, but I didn't hear a word. My blood was pounding in my ears, the betrayal so deep I could barely stand to be in the same room as her. As she headed toward the door, fully dressed now, she turned to me one last time, her face crumpled in pain. I'm sorry, she whispered. But sorry wasn't enough. Not this time. The door slammed shut behind her, and just like that, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with was gone. My chest felt hollow, like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. But at least now, the truth was out. There was no going back. After throwing Megan and Josh out, I thought things would calm down. I had some kind of peace, even if it came with a lot of pain. But life doesn't give you a break when you need it most, does it? It had been a couple of weeks since the blow-up, and I was slowly trying to piece my life back together. Part of that included seeing someone new, Rachel. That day, Rachel had come over to my place to help me with some stuff around the house. She was trying to make it feel less like a battlefield and more like a home again. I had to work, but she told me she'd hang out until I got back. I left her there, thinking it'd be just another quiet afternoon. But of course, nothing's ever that simple. I was in the middle of a work call when my phone started buzzing like crazy. Text after text came in, but I ignored it for the moment. Work had been hectic, and I needed to focus. It wasn't until the call ended that I finally checked my phone and saw the messages, from Rachel. My heart skipped a beat as. Ethan, you need to get home ASAP. Your ex-wife is here, crying. She's at the door. She's begging me to let her in. My stomach dropped. Megan was back. After everything. I texted Rachel back quickly, don't let her in. I'll be home as soon as I can. But the texts kept Ethan, she's not leaving. She's literally on her knees on the porch, crying, begging me to let her explain. I don't know what to do. I could picture it in my head, Megan, the same woman who'd lied to my face, cheated on me with Josh, now reduced to a wreck, pleading for forgiveness. But what really bothered me was that she was doing this in front of Rachel. She had no right to involve her in this. I wrapped up everything at work as fast as I could and raced home. My mind was spinning the entire drive. What was Megan even thinking? And how the hell was Rachel handling this? When I finally pulled up to the house, my heart was pounding. I could see Megan, still on her knees on the porch, tears streaming down her face, as Rachel stood in the doorway, looking completely lost. The sight was unreal, Megan, who never let anyone see her break, now completely shattered, while my new life and my old one collided in front of me. As soon as I stepped out of the car, Megan turned her tear-filled eyes toward me. Ethan, please just listen to me, she sobbed, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I'll do anything to fix this. Rachel, standing in the doorway, looked at me, uncertain. She hadn't let Megan inside, but she clearly didn't know what to do with the situation. I walked up the steps, my body tense. Megan, what are you doing here? I've been so stupid, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what I was thinking. It was all a mistake. I know I hurt you, but I love you, Ethan. Please, just give me one more chance. I stared down at her, my emotions a tangled mess. Megan had torn my life apart, and now she wanted me to believe that it was all just a mistake. That somehow, her betrayal could be swept under the rug if she cried hard enough. Rachel stayed quiet, watching from the doorway, giving me space to handle this. But I could see the tension in her face. She didn't need this kind of drama, and honestly, neither did I. "Megan, you need to leave," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. "It's over. You made your choice." She shook her head, her tears flowing faster. "No, please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was confused, but I've realized, you're the one I want. You've always been the one. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I felt a surge of anger rise in me. "You've got to be kidding me. You didn't realize anything, Megan. You got caught. You think just because you're sorry now that everything's going to be fine? You think you can crawl back here and it'll be like nothing ever happened?" Rachel cleared her throat softly, stepping forward just a bit. "Ethan, maybe we should just..." But before she could finish, Megan turned to her, her eyes wide with desperation. "Rachel, please, you have to understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was stupid. I was scared. But Ethan and we're supposed to be together." Rachel glanced at me, unsure. But I could see she wasn't buying Megan's act either. "Megan," I said, my voice firm. "You need to go. Whatever we had, it's gone. You destroyed it. There's no coming back from that." For a second, Megan just stared at me, like she couldn't process the words. Then, slowly, she stood up, her body shaking. "Fine," she whispered, wiping her face. "But I'm not giving up on us. I'll be back." She turned and walked away, her figure fading into the distance as she disappeared down the street. Rachel and I stood there in silence for. After Megan's dramatic exit, the house felt heavy with tension. I stood there on the porch with Rachel, still trying to process what had just happened. I hadn't expected Megan to come crawling back like that, but a part of me knew she would. She wasn't the type to give up easily, not when she thought she could manipulate her way out of things. And yet, seeing her like that, so broken and desperate, didn't give me any satisfaction. It just left me feeling drained. Rachel broke the silence first. "That was intense," she said, her voice soft. She looked at me, her eyes searching my face for some kind of reaction. "Are you sure you're okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "I will be," I said quietly, glancing toward the street where Megan had disappeared. "I just didn't expect her to show up like that." Rachel stepped closer, placing a hand on my arm. "I get it. She's still trying to hold on, even though it's over. But you don't owe her anything, Ethan. You've given her more than enough chances." I looked at Rachel, feeling a surge of gratitude. She had handled the whole situation with a kind of patience and grace I hadn't expected. She could have freaked out, left, or told Megan off, but she didn't. Instead, she stayed calm, knowing that this was my mess to handle. "You're right," I said, exhaling deeply. "It's over." She made sure of that. We stood there for a few more moments before heading back inside. The living room still felt like a battlefield, the scene of Megan's betrayal replaying in my mind. But now, it was different. Now, it wasn't just about the pain she caused, it was about moving on. Finally. Rachel sat down on the couch, looking around the room. "I'm sorry you had to go through that again. I mean, I knew things with her were messy, but seeing it. It's not your problem," I said, sitting next to her. "I appreciate you being here, though. I know this isn't what you signed up for." She smiled, that warm smile that had pulled me in the first time we met. "Look, I knew you were going through some stuff when we reconnected. I didn't expect everything to be easy. But I'm here, Ethan. I care about you. I wouldn't have stuck around if I didn't." Her words settled something inside me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning in the chaos of Megan's lies. Rachel was here, and she wasn't trying to fix things or make me forget what happened. She was just, here. And maybe that was enough for now. I leaned back against the couch, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet. "For dealing with all of this. I know it wasn't easy." Rachel shrugged, giving me a playful nudge. "Hey, I didn't have to throw her out or anything. You did the hard part." We both laughed, the tension finally breaking. It felt good to laugh, to share that moment with someone who wasn't tangled up in the mess of my past. Someone who actually wanted to be part of my future. For the rest of the evening, Rachel and I talked about everything but Megan. It felt like a small victory, a step in the right direction. The house didn't feel so suffocating anymore, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like I had a chance to move forward. Megan would probably try again, she wasn't the type to let go easily. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had my own life to rebuild, and Rachel was a part of that. Megan could crawl and beg all she wanted, but my answer would stay the same. It was over. The days after Megan's breakdown were strangely calm. I expected her to try something drastic, another visit, more calls, endless texts. But, surprisingly, I didn't hear from her at all. It was like she had disappeared. Maybe she'd finally realized there was nothing left to fight for. Maybe, in some twisted way, she thought leaving me alone would win me back. But whatever her reasoning, the silence was almost eerie. Rachel and I spent more time together, and slowly, things started to feel normal again. Well, as normal as they could after everything. We had dinner together, hung out on the weekends, and even started talking about making plans for the future. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could actually breathe. But Megan wasn't finished. I should have known it was only a matter of time before she tried again. It was a Friday, and I was heading out of work, finally looking forward to a quiet weekend. My phone buzzed, and I checked it, Megan. She'd left me a voicemail. Part of me wanted to delete it without even listening, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into my car, took a deep breath, and hit play. Her voice was soft, almost too calm. "Ethan. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I just need you to know something. I made a mistake. I see that now. I can't undo what I did, but I need you to understand how much I regret it. I was confused, I was lost, but I know now that I want you back. Please, just talk to me. I'll be at the park near our house tomorrow afternoon if you're willing to hear me out. Please, Ethan. I love you." I sat there in the car, the message replaying in my head. I wasn't surprised she tried to reach out again, but it still hit a nerve. Megan had a way of getting under my skin, even when I thought I was over her. It wasn't that I wanted her back, I was certain about that, but part of me still felt the weight of her words. The memories of what we had were hard to shake, even if she'd ruined everything. That night, Rachel came over, and I told her about the voicemail. She listened patiently, as always, but I could tell it bothered her a little. Not because she didn't trust me, but because it was a reminder that Megan was still in the picture, at least in some small way. "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked, her eyes searching mine. "I don't know," I admitted, staring down at my hands. "I don't want to see her, but I feel like maybe I should, just to put an end to it once and for all." Rachel was quiet for a moment before nodding. "I get it. Closure, right? But just be careful. She's manipulative, Ethan. She's going to try everything to get back in your head." I nodded, knowing Rachel was right. Megan wasn't the type to just walk away. She would fight, and she'd use every trick she knew to make me doubt myself. But I was ready this time. I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her world of lies. The next day, I drove to the park. I wasn't planning to stay long, just long enough to tell Megan that it was truly over, that there was no going back. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and walked toward the spot where Megan had said she'd be. There she was, sitting on a bench, looking out at the trees like she hadn't just blown up my entire life. When she saw me approaching, her face lit up, like she'd won some kind of victory just by getting me there. "Ethan," she said softly, standing up. "I didn't think you'd come." "I'm only here to make one thing clear, Megan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There's nothing left between us. You need to stop calling, stop showing up at my house, and stop trying to fix something that's broken beyond repair." Her smile faltered, and for a second, I thought she might actually break down again. But then she stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Ethan, I made a mistake. I know that now. But we can work through this. We've been through worse." I shook my head. "No, we haven't. This is different. You lied. You cheated. And there's no coming back from that." Megan's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel any sympathy this time. I'd given her all the chances in the world, and she'd thrown them away. "Please," she whispered, reaching out for me. "I'll do anything. Just, give me one more chance. I love you." I stepped back, out of her reach. "You don't get to say that anymore, Megan. Not after everything." She stood there, frozen, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. And maybe she couldn't. Megan had always been in control, always able to twist things in her favor. But not this time. "Goodbye, Megan," I said, turning away. As I walked back to my car, I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. This time, it was truly over. After my final conversation with Megan at the park, I thought that was it. I thought she'd finally gotten the message. But deep down, I knew Megan wouldn't give up that easily. She'd always been someone who believed she could talk or manipulate her way out of anything. That was part of her problem, she never really understood the word no. But a few days passed, and everything was quiet. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. For the first time in what felt like forever, I started to believe she'd actually let go. Rachel and I spent more time together, and it felt good, really good. For once, I wasn't caught in the chaos of lies and betrayal. I was with someone who genuinely cared about me, someone who didn't play games. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything came to a head. Rachel and I were out at a local cafe, sitting by the window, enjoying a quiet lunch. We were talking about something trivial, I can't even remember what it was, when I noticed her eyes flick toward the door. Her face stiffened just a bit, but she quickly turned back to me, trying to act like nothing had happened. "What is it?" I asked, glancing toward the entrance. And that's when I saw her. Megan. She was standing at the door, staring at us through the window, her face pale. I hadn't told her about Rachel. I hadn't seen the need. But now, as she stood there watching us, it was clear she had found out. For a split second, our eyes locked, and I could see the realization sink in. Megan knew. She knew I had moved on. That someone else was now sitting across from me in the same cafe where she and I used to come. The shock on her face was unmistakable, and for the first time in all of this, she didn't look angry or defiant. She looked broken. Rachel noticed the tension in the air, but she stayed calm, as usual. She leaned in closer, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to do anything, Ethan. Just let her be." But I couldn't just ignore Megan standing there, staring at us like the ground had been ripped out from under her. So I stood up, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. I wasn't going to make a scene, but I needed to confront this head-on. As I walked toward the door, Megan didn't move. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like all the fight had drained out of her. "Megan," I said quietly, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting between me and Rachel through the window. I didn't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know you had someone else. There was no anger in her tone, no sharp edge like I had expected. Just sadness. Megan, you need to understand something, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's over. It's been over for a while. You've known that. She shook her head slightly, like she was still trying to process what she was seeing. I thought if I kept trying, you'd come back. That maybe we could fix things. But seeing you here, with her voice cracked, and for the first time since this all started, I felt a twinge of sympathy. You've really moved on, haven't you? I nodded. Yes, Megan. I have. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, trying to hold herself together. I didn't think you'd move on so fast, she whispered. I thought you'd at least wait. I sighed, not wanting to hurt her any more than I already had, but I had to be honest. Megan, I didn't move on fast. You and I were done the moment you decided to betray me. It just took me a while to realize it. She looked down, her hands shaking slightly as she clutched her purse. I don't know what to do now, she admitted, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I thought I could get you back. But seeing you with her, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would all be okay, but I knew that wasn't my place anymore. Megan needed to figure out her own life now. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I think it's time for you to focus on yourself, I said gently. You need to let this go. Let me go. She nodded, her tears finally spilling over, but she didn't make a scene. She just stood there for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something more, but in the end, she didn't. She just turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, watching her retreat, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over, really over this time. Megan had seen the truth, and there was no more pretending, no more lies. She knew I had moved on, and there was nothing left to hold on to. When I walked back inside, Rachel looked up at me with a soft smile. Everything okay? I nodded, sitting back down across from her. Yeah. It's finally over. Rachel reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Good. Now we can really move forward. And for the first time, I truly believed we could.